Let's get KC Joyner's thoughts on the game. Should Eagle fans be upset that they weren't able to figure out a way to score yesterday? They lose 17-9. Their defense kept them in the game. You give up 17 points, you probably feel like you should win that game, Casey. So, Wentz or not, do you feel that the Eagles should have won that game yesterday?
You are what scoreboard says you are. That's the old Parcells saying. And so I'll take that approach and say, yeah, should they won the game? No, because they didn't. And they didn't make enough plays to do so. I just keep looking at you look at the roster and you look at all the things they did and all the backup players and how well they're playing with all the backup players. And it's like, wow, you get to admire that team so much. And I look at Josh McCown and I go, that's the best you could do for your backup quarterback. And, it's like you got good players in a lot of the other positions, and it was just a big enough drop-off. And, he's just not a guy I want to go up against the Seahawks in a wild card playoff game if I can help it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at that point, they had Sudfeld. He got hurt. Then they brought McCown in because Sudfeld had gotten hurt, and then I guess they ended up sticking with McCown over Sudfeld. But Wentz had played the whole season, so the backup wasn't really, a factor here. It ends up turning into a factor. But what did Seattle do once Wentz went out that maybe caused McCown some problems? Because he didn't play poorly. It just it seemed like they couldn't convert the big third down and the couple of fourth downs.
I think what they did, they honestly, once they got Wentz out of the game, I think they said we don't trust McCown to throw the vertical pass, and we know McCown. I've been tracking that bad decision rate for years, and McCown, for the years that he would be a starter and getting enough passes to qualify, he was always one of the worst in the league in bad decision rate. Bad decision rate measures how often you make a mental error that leads to a turnover opportunity for opposing teams. It usually means you're forcing passes into coverage, you're not reading coverages properly. I think they said once he was in there, okay, well, we're going to make him. We'll sit back into coverages and see if he'll didn't. And mind you, I'm glad that he didn't because it was part of what kept Philadelphia in the game. But at the same time, there were times that it was you need to be taking more chances because this defense is too high percentage to let you go on and do a 12-play drive.
Yeah, and obviously once Wentz went out, the mobility too was a factor. I mean, I thought that McCown did an admirable job trying to keep some plays alive, but there were some things that maybe Wentz converts with his feet that McCown couldn't do. And overall, though, I don't know, because some of the fans have been kind of banging on Peterson that they thought that he didn't do a good job. What could have been different with the offense when McCown went out there?
I still would like him to go heavy. Dillard only played 2 plays, and you've got Goddard, you've got Ertz, and you've got Perkins. And we've seen that Perkins can be a good pass catch. We talked about the last couple of weeks. And Ertz, with the rib and the kidney, he's playing 88% of plays, 61 out of 69 snaps he's out there, and Perkins is only playing 17 snaps. I don't want to rotate Ertz out. I get who he is, and he had 4 catches, and he had that 132-yard catch. So he had a decent game. I still would like to see him out of the game a little more and Perkins in there a little more. Maybe you keep Ertz fresh and you can take advantages of Perkins' ability and do things like that. And we've been talking all year about going heavy because they've got Robert Davis out there for 70% of snaps. Don't even send a target his way. I think if you put Perkins out there, you end up getting more production than you would by going to 3 wide receiver sets like they did.
Do you feel like that Goddard was the only reliable target at some point in that game? He had 7 catches once again. I mean, the tight end spot has been the one consistent, reliable position on the offensive side of the ball. But when you look at the receivers, what did you see there?
I would agree. I mean, and Ward, he gets 4 targets, 3 receptions, 24 yards. Ward he's a dink and dunk target. And I think that if you went with Goddard's 7 out of 8 for 73 yards, and that's such good. And if you had Ertz in there, whether they're 9 of 12 for 117 yards, I mean, that's really good. I think if you put Perkins out there, it would have been different. I still would have went heavy because you've got. I mean, when Wentz is out there, we're talking about going heavy, and then you're only putting Dillard out there for 2 plays. I just would have been going more 3 tight ends. You don't have to put everybody on the line. You can flex them out because you've got pass-catching tight ends. I'd like to have done that. I'd like to have gone Dillard more. I'd like to lean more heavily on the ground game. Not having Howard obviously hurt, but still you had Scott and you had Sanders, so you were still doing pretty good there. So I just think that's what I would have gone more with rather than say, okay, I'm going to have McCown throw the ball as often as he did. He didn't throw a lot, but I still would have liked to have seen them lean even more heavily on the ground game because I think it would have kept more drives alive.
What was the biggest difference, Casey, in the defensive game plan from Jim Schwartz compared to the one 6 weeks ago?
The one play that stands out for me defensively is last play of the game or last offensive play before the kneel downs is, okay, so Wilson said, I know they're going to go zero. They're not going to have no free safety. This free safety is going to come up. He's spying Wilson on the play. So, okay, we're going to get a spy. We know we're going to go a bunch set. We're going to have 3 wide receivers out there. They ended up being able to get Metcalf on Epps. Per ProFootballReference.com, Epps had the highest yards per target allowed of any Eagles secondary player this year. He only had like 6 targets thrown at him, but still he was averaging 11.2 yards per target allowed. And they knew, I think, if we put this out there, we're going to be able to, based on the way the defensive formation looked, we're going to be able to get the kind of matchup that we want. And they were able to do that too frequently. Were they able to get the kind of matchups that they wanted? And I get that the Eagles have, you're playing Maddox, you're playing LeBlanc, you're playing Mills. You don't have, that's not the best secondary core you're going to want out there, but still they're able to get the matchups that they wanted more frequently than I think that the Eagles would have wanted going into the game.
Most Eagles fans would be surprised to hear that Epps had enough snaps to even rank somewhere among the cornerbacks. In their
most wouldn't know he was on the team, to be honest.
And most don't even know his first name.
Yeah. He had 13 snaps. He was on the field for 13 snaps for this contest. So I think the Seahawks, just guessing, I'll see the coaches tape, but just guessing, I think that they knew if we put these sort of sets out here, we're going to get this look and response, we're going to get this personal look and response, and they knew they could get that. Because on the play where Metcalf catches the play at the end of the game, they ran, it looked like they were running it was like we're going to run a screen pass, and he's just sort of a double move, like I'm fake blocking, doing a little stutter, and then I'm going, and Epps bit entirely on the screen. I think they knew they were going to get that look, and that's just like, why do you have him out there, and why do you have him biting on that sort of play? Why are you not playing for the vertical pass? So it was like multiple mistakes on that play. Having said that, when you hold that offense, when you shut down the running game like the Eagles did on defense, and just obliterate the running game and make them a one-dimensional team, I think you have to expect that you're going to get some kind of matchups like that.
Yeah, and if you get a 17-9 game, it's hard to sit there and blame the Eagle defense, but there were some key third downs that they had some problems with. I mean, if you want to nitpick and say, look, you got to get off the field on those third downs, I don't have a problem with that, but 17 points at home, you got to win that game.
You got to, but the thing it's Lockett. You look at Lockett and Metcalf. If you held the Seahawks to only 17 points, and you've got Lockett and Metcalf going up against the crew that the Eagles were playing, those cornerbacks I just mentioned a couple minutes ago. I mean, Lockett in 2018, he nearly broke my rankings charts as far as for statistical rankings for receivers, because I rank receivers based on it's on a kind of curve, and he did so well that he made players who were getting 10 and 11 yards per attempt averages look mediocre compared to what he was doing, and he's been not quite as good this year, but he's been pretty close, and Metcalf was playing at that level yesterday too. So being able to hit that amount of big plays and have that sort of big play potential and still only allow 17 points, I got to give them kudos for that part.
Yeah, and Jeff, you mentioned earlier, they hit Wilson 11 times. Yeah. I mean, it was just a couple of big plays. The one Metcalf, I mean, they got him matched up on Maddox the one time, and then the last one against Epps. But he has 160 yards, so obviously he had the big game. But 17 points overall. It's just the Eagles just didn't have enough. They ran out of bullets, essentially.
Yeah, they did, and it's hard to. I look at that team and you think about, because Howie Roseman takes all kinds of grief about, you lost this guy, he didn't, and just looking at they're so far down in their depth chart, and they're still having solid players for who they have. Believe me, the Dolphins were down that far on the depth chart at the end of the year, and they were playing better, but they had some really terrible players in secondary. For this, where as far down the depth chart you have this much talent, it speaks well to Roseman's ability to build a team, and for the Eagles to get that kind of production out of their offensive players too, to be as far down on their list too. So you got to give them credit for that. But then I see McCown, and I realize he's the third stringer. But would I rather have Duck Hodges out there? I think I would have.
Oh, come on, no man, Duck Hodges save of the day. That would have been a perfect Eagles story. Duck Hodges saves the day. Real quick, couple of things as they move forward here. Jason Peters says he wants to come back. Does his play merit bringing him back at left tackle?
Does he think he wants to come back as an all-pro left tackle, or does he want to come back at I don't want to call it a discount, but do we want to pay him at the level he's at now? Because if we'll pay him at the level he's at now, you could get one more year. Obviously, you need to be thinking about your replacement. You need to be thinking about what you're going to do there long term. But would I pay him for another year of what he has this year? Yeah, until I can get a replacement in there. But if the price is too high,
well, they drafted Dillard in the first round last year, who you talked about, and he played well at left tackle. He did not play well at right tackle. But the whole point of they drafted Dillard because they thought Peters was done, and now Peters is saying, well, I'd like to play again after you drafted a guy in the first round. I think it puts him in a kind of precarious situation, including the fact that Peters and the ownership group have a very good relationship.
They do. I'm always a guy. I like to think of offensive line depth. I mean, teams like to keep the same 5 players up front, but I always like to have a talented 6th and 7th. And if I can get another year where I've got Dillard as my 6, and I can put him out there again, I would have liked to have used him more often. Go heavy in there, do a number of things. You can get him in there and things, but I'd rather have that sort of depth because if Peters isn't there and Dillard's out there, you want to injure away from where you at tackle at that point. So I'm always for depth, but again, you got to do it at the right price. And Peters is just not worth the elite money that he used to be worth.
Malcolm Jenkins, he says he will not be back under the current deal. Should the Eagles give him he's 32, do you give him that big-time safety money?
Not at 32, and if you look at the Eagles' history, they are very wise in saying that once you hit that 30 range at any position, with rare exceptions, we're not going to pay you. Jenkins might be that rare exception, but if you look throughout all the sporting history, and again with rare exceptions, once a player hits 35, physiologists will tell you that the human body between the ages of 35 and 40 goes through more of a physical decline in that 5-year span than it does at any other span in your entire adult lifespan. So I just, you're 32 now, you really have to be thinking that maybe he's going to play up to 35 max. If he does better than that, that's great. But if he wants anything that's going to give him any more longer term than that, if I'm the Eagles, I say, look, I can't do it.
Go back to Saturday, the Buffalo game. I mean, the last 3 minutes of that game was a 10-minute conversation in itself. I mean, a bonkers way for that thing to end, but an unbelievable individual effort by Watson to win that game.
Watson is phenomenal, and Josh Allen, He let the game rattle him. He needs. I don't think that's what we're going to see in the future out of Josh Allen. But he played great in the first half, and then when it started to get pressure time, he started to get rattled. We're seeing these playoffs be like it used to be before the Patriots run off 20 years of basically going to the Super Bowl every other year, where teams now need to have that one game. They need to get their growth period where you get to the playoffs and then you learn how to play in the playoffs and things of that nature. And that's what I think the Bills are at, and the Texans, because they'd had that experience and had been there before. I think it made a huge difference for them, and it speaks volumes when they could come back like that.
I'm sick about it, Casey. You know how bullish I was on the Bills, and I was trying to get you on. It sounded like you were too, and I thought we had something going on there.
But Casey, do you think that Allen the moment was too big for him?
Yeah, I do. I think looking at I think he did get rattled by things. I think I don't think it was. He doesn't. Again, it's hard. I say he got rattled by it, and he did. But I still look at the weapons. He's got one good receiver, and I mean Beasley's a solid slot receiver. But if you're talking an impact player, he's got one good receiver, and I just think though that
I think the Eagles would trade receiving cores with them.
Yes, I think they would. I think they probably would.
But probably the only team that they would do it with.
Yeah. I still just think, the moment was just too big for him. I just think that and mind you, the moment was too big for other quarterbacks earlier too, and I think he'll learn from this. But he's got his playoffs are different. It felt like a regular game in the first half, and then I think he thought, my God, it's the playoffs. We're going to win this game, and that got to him. I think it's that simple.
I mean, what happened in that last
That lateral was just a disgrace.
But even that, I mean,
I know it didn't hurt
yet
them, but
awesome.
that to me showed more the lack of the moment being too big than the sack.
But then their defense, they don't get the fourth down. They give the ball back to the Texans. Then the Texans go for it on fourth, and then they don't get it. And then what the heck happened after that? What were they doing?
That's the thing.
You didn't like that throw to the fullback, 50 yards downfield? Double covered?
I think it was into double coverage, no less. And that's the thing.
What's a fullback?
The Patriots do what, when you look at I keep talking about this where I watch the Do Your Job series. If you do look at that and you look at other things in the Patriots, they know when they get into those situations, they practiced for a lot of these game plan situations. They're very, very, very heavy on situational football, and you'd think the Bills would be like that, but I'm seeing that and going, you guys, I don't think you had a plan for if the game turns out like this is what we're going to do, because, or at least your quarterback didn't execute it if you did, because why are you having the fullback run that far downfield anyway? Why would you? I mean, how many times did you do that all year long? 5, 3, 1? I mean, it's such a low percentage play. It makes you think the Bills have to work on situational football.
By the way, the center on that team, Mike Morris, is a really good center. He completely whiffed on a great play call. It was that rollout for Josh Allen to the right, like a quarterback sweep that would have probably been a touchdown, but then became -2 because the center just completely whiffed on the linebacker.
Well, that game, the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, it was just bizarre.
Carnival music.
And the Texans go on, and they'll take on the Titans, who got a huge game from Henry. And I guess, I don't know. I guess it's the first time we can say, look, is this Patriots thing showing its first signs of slipping, or they just need a couple of pieces and they'll be right back and they'll be in the mix again, or do you legitimately feel like the Titans knocked this thing off the 20-year perch?
I think the Titans showed that the Patriots defense, when you go back to like week 8, people were talking about this defense is as good as the 85 Bears, 2000 Ravens. This is one of the greatest defenses of all time. And, of course, we're looking at the schedule going, yeah, they're beating up with some really bad competition. Let's see how they play the second half. Last 9 games of the season, they were 4-5, the team was, and it was partly because the defense took a big step back, and they don't handle power football well. They didn't handle power football well last year, the year before. That's just not what they do, and usually their offense can keep them out of having to handle power football by making the other team have to throw football. But I think that's a problem that's going to be ongoing for them. And as far as Brady goes, look, Brady, if you look at the receiving core he had, I mean, he's got some really subpar receivers. He might even trade the receiving corps of the Eagles based on how that game went. But I think you can't say, hey, we're going to give you this receiving corps going forward, and we're going to expect elite production out of you, because there aren't maybe 2 or 3 quarterbacks who could get good production out of that crew, much less elite.
And then yesterday, the early game, I think we all thought that New Orleans was just going to win that game going away, the too much offense. But I thought Minnesota's defense was really the difference maker in that game.
It was, and Drew Brees, they've wanted to for a couple of years, and you got to read between the lines in this, they've wanted to lean more heavily on the ground game, and even Thomas is a fantastic receiver, just an awesome pass catcher, but it's all dink and dunk passes. And even when they go to throw that vertical pass, that long pass in the first half, they have Taysom Hill in there, and they have him doing that instead of having Brees. I think Brees doesn't have quite the long ball ability that he used to have, and it makes their offense more limited. And if you can say, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and trust that you can't get those long passes, we can stand up here and start to slow down your ground game, you can start to slow down that offense. And if you do that, as we talked last week, they were, if they get into shootout games, they were undefeated, but if you get them into low-scoring games, they're not as good, and I think that's exactly what the Vikings did yesterday.
All right, Casey's back on Friday to preview the divisional round of the playoffs, and, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thank you, pal.
Appreciate it.